Hey, everybody, welcome into the Blogger Bowl. This is the first edition of the show. I don't know if you remember, we had our blog during bowl season last year. I am Matt Rooney alongside Phil Goff. You might have seen some of the quick hitter, preseason over-under win totals I've been giving you this year so far this offseason. That's to all set up for this big show. It's going to be Phil, myself, and producer Dan, who's not with us here today. He's got the afternoon off, but it's me and Phil, and we're going to be talking a little bit of Notre Dame football because that is kind of right up our wheelhouse. But also we think there's some pretty good money to be made there on their season win total. But first and foremost, you guys know me. I've been on Brown Bag Bets a bunch, and you've seen my stuff on BetSperts. Phil, why don't you introduce yourself to the people?
As Matt mentioned, I'm Phil. Matt and I have been friends since 2005, 2006?
High school. Whenever we started high school.
Yeah. So I've been writing about Notre Dame football for One Foot Down as a part of the SB Nation for about the past 5 years. Obviously, played high school football. You can check tape at Fenwick with Matt, and then played.
Maybe don't check the tape.
I don't know if the tape's out there, but you can check it. And then played 4 years at College of the Holy Cross in Massachusetts, the College of the Holy Cross in Massachusetts.
Welcome on, Phil. As I said, we're both Notre Dame. As you know, from my stuff, I'm a Notre Dame fan. Phil writes for Notre Dame. He's been a Notre Dame fan also for as long as I can remember, since we've been friends. Promise you, though, this bet we're coming at you with today, this preseason pick, is not a homer pick. If you watched on Brown Bag Bets this morning, I talked about it with Andy and the guys. Andy tried to give me a little bit of crap for being a homer. I shot him down immediately. This is not a homer pick, taking the over 8.5 wins at minus 115. Be sure to do some shopping. Go to FanDuel. It's like minus 140. DraftKings was like minus 145. So Caesars at minus 115, and it's a no-brainer to grab. Phil, I talked a little bit about the schedule and how that sets up. I think that really, realistically, you could go 0-3 in your big this year if you're Notre Dame, at home against Clemson later, at Ohio State to start the year, and at USC, and you'll still probably be favored to cash that over 8.5. You have to be perfect in your toss-ups after that, but there's really no reason to believe why this talented roster with a lot of veteran presence coming back can't do that.
I completely agree. And looking at the big games, it's you think they're going to steal one out of those three, right? I don't think they're going to steal Ohio State at Ohio State in Columbus. Crossing the fingers there. The optimist in me is not even pushing for that one at all. You want that to be a competitive game, but looking at the other two, at Clemson at home and then USC as well, I think Clemson has obviously a top-tier elite defense. That game could be a toss-up depending on how their offense performs. And then USC, again, a toss-up. Even if they go 0-3 in that, the rest of the schedule is not too bad. I mean, the only potential games that I think could be...
BYU's a tricky one. BYU's a tricky one. They got a tough schedule, but that's a talented roster. Like, that's a team that could be maybe 3-2 or whatever it is at the time. I think it's week 6. But, they're a talented roster full of grown men with a head coach who's been there for a little while. That one could be tricky, but still, that's a game they'll be favored by, probably 5-6 points.
Also, I hate to say this, but, do you trust a bunch of Mormons in Vegas? They might go a little wild.
Temptation. City of Temptation. First time they've been there.
But honestly, the reason that I'm so optimistic about this 8.5 total, and if it was 9, I'd be on the fence, but the 8.5 total with their 3 big games, the rationale behind that is a couple things. Notre Dame's defense is loaded with NFL talent. They have a first-round pick at defensive end in Isaiah Foskey. They have a borderline first-round pick in Brandon Joseph, the transfer from Northwestern, and have, a top, I think ESPN released the list of top 10 linebacker, and they have a top 10 linebacking core who's really veteran. So they have an elite back-end defender, an elite edge rusher, and a great linebacking core. Obviously, the offense has a lot of work to do, but the offensive line is going to be improved. But when you have a top-tier playmakers at each level of the defense, even if you come out of the gate slow on offense, you're going to win games because it's going to force turnovers. It's going to help the field position battle. So at the end of the day, that's why I'm so bullish on this pick.
Yeah, and now camp is just camp, and you have to do it in real life, real live game speed. But from all reports, it looks like the quarterback position is actually has a pretty good chance to turn into a positive this year, as opposed to, where was it going to go from Jack Cohn and Ian Book? It looks like we have a pretty good chance to take a step up. I know Jack Cohn's numbers were pretty solid last year, but he left a lot to be desired for most Notre Dame fans because he kind of limited the offense with his kind of statuesque presence, we'll call it. But for me, it's it not surprisingly starts in the trenches, and on both sides of the ball. like you said, we bring it back. Notre Dame's bringing back a veteran offensive line that should be much improved. Has brought in back, I should say, to Notre Dame's program one of the top 2, 3, 4 offensive line coaches in the country that built a lot of dominant offensive lines. And Harry Easton. So you're gonna be good on the offensive line. You talked about the defensive line and the linebacking core. They're going to have a very good front seven on the defensive end. And while that can only get you so far against the Ohio States of the world and the Clemsons of the world, that's going to be good enough to win most of the games against the teams that you are better than. And while Notre Dame's playmakers are not up to snuff with the Ohio States and the Clemson, their playmakers are as good, if not. You have Michael Mayer, Tobias Merriweather, freshman. He's having a very good camp. Like, you have the potential to have playmakers as good as anybody play outside of those 3 teams, the big 3 games. And when you're as good as you are on the lines in your front seven, you're going to win most of those matchups because you're going to be able to possess the ball, get the ball back, and control the line of scrimmage. And that's what, outside of beating the best teams in the country, that's what winning college football looks like. And that's what Notre Dame's done for the last however many years.
You nailed that. And with a significantly improved O-line play and having, running backs who I think can get it done is going to be huge. And also having a dual threat running quarterback is huge. As mentioned, there's a bunch of question marks at wide receiver. I think there's some high upside guys there, completely unproven though. So we'll see what happens there. But it helps when you have an unproven wide receiver core to have a first round draft pick at tight end who's a absolute man child. So again, having Michael Mayer be a safety blanket for a first year quarterback is going to be extremely helpful. And also having a first year quarterback who should have a much improved offensive line, who's also a top tier elite athlete. So if he gets some time looking to Michael Mayer, looking to some of the other athletes, but having his feet is going to be huge. So last year, for people who don't know, Tyler Buckner was primarily a running quarterback, came in and did some good things throwing, but was a bit up and down. This year, we should see a true dual threat quarterback, and I think we'll see a lot of design runs, and Tommy Rees is going to do as much as he can to get him comfortable, get him some play action, max protect for some deep shots. But at the end of the day, a lot of RPOs are going to be all over the place. So while I'm kind of a wait till you see it on the offense. Obviously, I think because of the defense, because of the offensive line, because of Michael Mayer, and because of the NFL talent that's sprinkled kind of throughout the roster, this 8.5, pending some bad injuries, should be an absolute lock.
I agree. And you talked about it with Mayer there and the dual threat quarterback. I feel like their offense has a perfect storm for one-on-one chances deep. And the one thing that you could talk about Notre Dame's receiving core, I guess the redeeming quality, is their speed. They are very, very fast. They can run by some people. You don't have to be the most talented wide receiver in the world to run a go route past the corner that you're faster than, that isn't pressing you all that hard. And if you have that chance, you have Michael Mayer, who's going to take up a lot of attention from linebackers and safeties in the middle. You have a dual threat quarterback who's probably going to run decently early, and he's going to be something that middle linebackers and linebackers are keying in on. So I think that's kind of a perfect storm that's going to give these receivers a lot of one-on-one chances. When you have that speed on the outside, it's a 50-50 ball. And even if you don't catch your 50-50 balls 50% of the time, if you're going to have those one-on-one chances, you're going to come down with them a decent amount, or at least enough where you're going to make some big plays and kind of make people start going back out, respecting that deep route. And then that's going to open things up for the run game. So like I said, like we both said, health is huge. They need everybody to stay healthy. Jarrett Patterson, they said, has got a foot injury now at the starting center. Hopefully he's back for Ohio State. But I think this 8.5 at -115, it's like anything can happen, but I love that over because I see them very much so as a 9-3 team. I see them going 1-2 in their big 3 games and probably slipping up somewhere along the way, because this is still, as much as we want to say there's continuity on the staff, because there is, and there's continuity on the roster, still a first-year head coach. There's probably going to be some growing pains. He's doing everything right in the recruiting trail, and I think he's going to be at Notre Dame for a very long time. But first-year head coach, there's going to be some growing pains along the way. So there's probably one loss somewhere along the way where you're kicking yourself. It's a game that Brian Kelly probably doesn't lose because he's been there so many times. But outside of that, over 8.5 at -115, I think you have to take it.
Yeah, I'm seeing either 10-2. It's kind of a almost 10-2 best case. 8-4 absolutely worst case if they're decimated by injuries. But I think they have enough depth. I think they have enough speed. If you look at the offensive side of the ball, you mentioned they've got some elite speed. 3 guys. Chris Tyree, Lorenzo Styles, and Braden Lenzy are all low 4.4, high 4.3 types of speed. So again, having that type of speed, having Michael Mayer, having a good offensive line, and then the elite potential great to elite defense should alleviate a lot of the kind of average to good teams that they're playing. So
Yeah.
again, this win total I'd be surprised if they don't hit it. Very surprised actually, but again, I think it's a sweet spot at 8.5 versus 9 or 9.5. I'd be sweating it out a little bit, but that 8.5 is a good right now, and get it while you can.
I think barring injuries here, last thing I'll say before we kind of get out of here, from a betting standpoint, I think worst case scenario, again, barring injuries, barring the absolute decimation of the roster from a bunch of injuries, I think worst case scenario, you're going into Southern Cal last week of the season at 8-3.
Yep.
So if you put down a big time future on this over 8.5, you're going into Southern Cal 8-3. Notre Dame is likely to be favored still in that game, if not a very close underdog. So you just take USC's money line to hedge a little bit.
Yeah.
If you want to get out of the bet, you can. You can also double down on Notre Dame. But I really think worst case scenario, you're probably looking at an 8-3 team going into USC. So you'll have a chance to hedge if you want to, because these are just regular season. Bowl games don't count. But that's all I got, and that's all Phil has. We got hit over 10 minutes here, which we probably could have gone about 20 more, but we'll keep it there for you guys. We'll be coming back with you next week. We got 5 shows next week. We're going to do conference previews for all the Power 5 conferences. Producer Dan's going to be with us there. And then in season, we're probably going to be coming at you Tuesdays and Thursdays. That's still TBD until we have an official lockdown schedule, but that's what it's looking like. And then maybe the occasional we'll go up against College Game Day on Saturday, see who wins that ratings battle. We have a big time week, but for now, we'll see you guys next week. Phil, thanks for joining me, and have a great weekend, guys.
Thanks, everybody.